I just, and I think that like being trans is fun too, especially if you're a white trans person, in my opinion. Being a white trans person is essentially, especially, and I know people don't like this, and I'm sorry to say this out loud, but it is real. If you're a white trans femme, or like a white, like a AMAB trans woman or whatever, right? Trans femme, but you're basically what to say is like, pre-transition you were a white male. Now I know that fucking sucks. Obviously, like I don't like hearing that or whatever. I don't like people describing me as that. The reality is like being trans is like baby's first minority, basically. It's your first time being a minority, and funnily enough, I think that that's super, super informative. It really changes your perspective on the world to finally be a minority. It changes so much. You realize so many things that you missed by not being a minority. For once in your life, not being a minority, you can learn so much. And that's a good thing, in my opinion. It's a great thing to learn things by not being by being a minority, right? You can learn like, oh fuck, yeah, no, I get it. I get it. I didn't get it before, but I get it now. You know? And it's cool. I think it's good. It's awesome. It's good. You know? So many times I didn't get it before. I used to, when I was like 20 or so, when I was 20 years old, I used to keyboard warrior for trans people on Reddit, okay? I was pro trans people on Reddit when I was 20 years old. This is 4 years before I came out as trans. And at the time, I used to literally defend trans people. Keyboard warrior for trans people. 4 years before I knew I was trans. But I didn't understand what it meant to be trans. I didn't get what it meant to be a minority. I didn't get what it meant to be that kind of person at all. I only knew what it meant to be me and to argue for a person that I didn't think I was, or I didn't know I was, right? And the reality is, when I argued for trans people as a non-trans person, as a person who'd never had any experience being a minority, what I missed was not the rational arguments for being trans, because I got those, I brought out the fucking studies, I dropped the fucking pages of studies, I dropped the studies of like, oh yeah, statistically speaking, being trans causes, if you're allowed to be trans, it means you're less likely to have negative outcomes in your life. I would drop the studies, but I didn't know what it meant to be trans or what it meant to be a minority. I didn't get it. I didn't understand. Now, with unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, right? I don't know how you word it. With only, 2.5 years of that understanding, I kind of get it. And I'm only going to continue to get it more the longer I am trans, right? Like the longer I live as a trans woman, the more I'm going to understand. What does it mean to live in a world where, like, you're trans and people fucking hate you and shit on you for your existence, and they'll say things that are blatantly to you transphobic, but to them, as a person who's never had any understanding of oppression in their life, that's not transphobic at all. How do you exist in that world, right? And you only can understand that by living it. You don't get to understand that without living it, unless you're like a super ally who has so many friends that are part of a minority group or whatever, right? And you listen to them. And when I say listen, I mean you really listen. Like you super understand. You don't just listen, you understand, right? Listening and understanding are two different things. So like, I know a lot of allies that listen but don't understand, I know a lot of people like that. I used to hang out in the Destiny Discord server a lot, and I think that that's like such the case of like, that is like Destiny's community to a T. They are definitely like their listeners, in my opinion. They think that they're allies. And in my opinion, a DGGer has no intention to be transphobic. The average DGGer does not want to be a transphobe. They want to be an ally. They want to help trans people. They care about trans people. But that doesn't mean that they understand, you know? Because most people just don't understand. And that's because they don't live it, they don't experience it, and they don't know people who experience it. They don't get it. It's not their fault, right? That's why, like, the number one thing that can help trans people, in my opinion, is for more people to be trans, be openly trans, be publicly trans, speak to people about being trans, talk about being trans, share their experience of being trans. That's the best way to help people being trans, because the more people get it, the safer you are as a trans person, right? That's what I noticed with non-binary is like non-binary. I was gonna say non-binaryism, so I'm fucking wasted or whatever. I don't really know what the word, I know what the fucking word is, okay? But like, for me personally, when I started out being trans, I only understood transness through a binary lens. I only understood, like, I am trans, I do not want to be a man, I want to be a woman. And I only understand transness through this lens. However, after speaking to people who are non-binary, after interacting with people who identify as non-binary, after understanding my own trans experience and understanding the layers of complexity between binary transism and non-binary transism, whatever the fuck you want to call it officially, I understood, like, I get it. Like, I don't necessarily live it, but I understand it, which is why I will never, ever, ever, ever be seen. Like, maybe, like, if you were to find, like, me and, you know, from 3 years ago talking about MBs, maybe I'll have a bad take on it. But in the last, like, year and a half or 2 years, I'm never going to have a bad MB take. Why? Because I fucking understand that I get it. Like, it's not weird. It makes sense. I understand. If you're non-binary, I get it. I'm not non-binary, but I fucking get it. I get you. I understand you. It makes sense to me. You are understood. And that's it. There's nothing wrong with how you interpret things, you know? And I think that the more you realize that you have these blind spots, the more you realize, oh, fuck, what else could I be wrong about? Finding that you have blind spots is one of the most important character development moments of a person growing up, in my opinion. Understanding that you actually could be wrong about something is so critically important. Because even if you're a very, very, very smart person, if you don't understand how you could be wrong very often, you're not actually practically smart. You might be, like, theoretically smart, but practically you're not smart. You're not intelligent. You're not paying attention. Kelly Cardigan is such a good example. Kelly Cardigan understands transness through one lens, and the other ways of experiencing transness, she just understands through a lens of, like, well, I'm going to be real with Kelly Cardigan, actually. I think Kelly Cardigan is first and foremost an attention seeker, in my opinion. That's why I don't respond to her. That's why I don't fight her. I don't argue with her. I think that personally, she thinks that the more she says wrong things, the more engagement she gets on social media. That's what she notices. And ultimately, do I blame her for that? Probably not. Though I think that she's, objectively speaking, a bad person for doing that for internet clout. Being a bad person for internet clout is a fucked up thing to do. But Kelly Cardigan herself does not believe 85% of the bullshit she says in her videos. She only says it because it gives her internet clout. Her hot takes are because she thinks they'll go viral. I wish she understood that you can go viral without having shit takes. I wish she got that, because you can. In my opinion, I've went viral quite a few times. I've got a pretty good internet presence without having shit hot takes, you know? Now, sometimes I do have hot takes that are shit, in my opinion. I've had a few. I've had more than one. But you don't need to have shit hot takes to go viral. And I wish Kelly understood that. She is beautiful. She has a incredibly, what I would assume, in-depth, wonderful, important to share trans experience. Blair White's experience as a trans woman could be so valuable for the world to hear. I wish Blair White simply talked about her trans experience. How valuable, how important could that be to hear as a trans woman who exists around conservatives? As a trans woman who exists around people that constantly fight for her identity, fight against her identity. What a powerful experience. What a valuable thing. What a thing that people don't get to hear all the time. So important for people to hear. And I wish she would just share that instead of thinking that the only way for her to get internet fame, internet success, internet, popularity is to bullshit, is to be anti-trans. That's the only way you can get notoriety, is to be anti-trans as a trans woman. But that's not true. Blair White has such an incredibly unique experience. I would love, if I could pick Blair White's brain for 2 hours, if I could talk to her, what does it mean to you to be trans? What has it been like for you to be trans? How did you know when did you know you were trans? What was it like when you started coming out? Did you notice how people treated you differently in the first year of transition, in the first 2 years of transition, after 5 years of transition, after 10 years of Oh my God, she has such an important story to tell. She's such an important story to tell, and she won't tell it because she thinks that the only way to get fucking popularity is to play to a conservative audience. It's so sad. It's just sad. It's just sad. It really is sad. Same with Kelly Cardigan. What an incredibly important experience. What a helpful experience. Imagine you are a 3 months transition or just prior to starting HRT transition woman, okay? And you're trying to understand what your experience is being trans. And Kelly Cardigan has a near identical story to you, but she won't share it because she decides to be anti-trans publicly. Maybe you could be like, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. It's sad. It almost makes me want to cry. It's so sad. Like, I feel for, and that's why for me, and this is why I use the example of baby's first minority, okay? For me, as a white trans woman, or whatever the fuck you want to say, okay? Being trans is my first minority. And ultimately, transgender women, specifically, or trans femmes, whatever you want to call it, trans femmes, transgender women. I think trans femmes is a better idea because it includes NBs who tend to present more femininely, right? They're my people. They are my people. And I don't care how dumb you are. I don't care how wrong you are. I don't care how fucking brainwormed you are. How, whatever. I don't care. If you're trans, if you're a trans femme, like I'm a trans femme, I love you. And I want you to be happy. It's why I've been on 4chan. I've been in DGG. I've been around the trans femmes who fucking hate themselves. I've been around these psychotic brainworm trans femmes. I've been around the worst trans femmes. And I just want you to love yourself. And I will never attack Kelly Cardigan publicly. I will never attack Blair White publicly. I will never attack a 4chan trans girl publicly. I want you to love yourself. I want you to be happy because you're my people. You're my people. That's what you are. You're mine. And I want you to be happy. Above all else, I want you to be happy.